Imagine that you are right now placing your hand on a table or any solid surface around you. You feel the hardness of the material, the resistance against your skin, and the absolute certainty that there is real physical contact between you and the object. Your intuition tells you that two solid objects cannot occupy the same space. That is why they touch and push against each other. This is the basis of all your perception of the world since the day you were born. But the truth is, you've never touched anything in your entire life. What you interpret as touch is, in fact, one of the greatest deceptions of the human mind. Your fingers have never actually touched the wood or metal of the table. There is an invisible abyss, an empty space that prevents you from truly feeling the material. Try closing your eyes for a second, and imagine that there is a force acting like a microscopic spring between every atom in your body and every atom in the outside world. This spring pushes back with a silent fury every time you try to get too close. What you call solidity is just this invisible protest. As Feynman already warned, the error lies not in what we see, but in the blind trust we place in what we believe we feel. Notice how your intuition fabricates a comfortable lie, so you can walk on the ground without questioning reality itself. If you could see the true scale of things, you would see that we are made of vast voids surrounded by guards that do not allow intruders. Feynman saw the error where no one suspected it, realizing that the world is far less solid than our senses allow us to admit. Now imagine a vast room plunged into twilight, where hundreds of people are participating in a strange event. Some of these people seem magnetic, feeling an uncontrollable urge to draw closer to one another, as if an invisible thread were pulling their bodies. Others feel an immediate repulsion, a discomfort that compels them to run to opposite corners of the room as soon as their eyes meet. Looking from the outside, you wouldn't be able to tell who is who, because everyone seems the same on the surface. There is a hidden property, something that cannot be measured by the eyes, but that defines every movement in that room. This property dictates who will be drawn to affection and who will be repelled by instant hatred. The shadow play is what is happening right now within every inch of matter that makes up your body. Within each atom, this same drama repeats itself on a scale that the human mind can barely process. There are entities that we call by technical names, but which operate under this same logic of absolute love and hate. One of these entities carries a weight that we call positive, while the other carries what we call negative. They seek each other out or avoid each other with an intensity that makes gravity seem like a bad joke. Positive and negative are not just names, they are polarities of a fundamental desire of nature. The positive seeks the negative with an insatiable hunger, but flees from another positive as if facing a plague. Two negatives hate each other with the same force, creating a barrier that nothing in the universe can easily break. It is this constant push and pull war that maintains the structure of everything you know. But why does this force exist? Why did nature decide that some things should love each other and others should hate each other without explanation? No one knows for sure what this charge truly represents in a profound sense. We know what it does, how it behaves, and how we can manipulate it. But the reason behind its existence remains one of the universe's best-kept secrets. Science often uses complicated names to hide the fact that we're still like children trying to understand a magic trick. We call it electricity, charge, and field, but these names are just labels on boxes we haven't yet managed to open. Feynman realized that intuition deceives us when we try to treat these phenomena as if they were merely tools in a utility box. Think about the last time you felt a slight crackle when touching a doorknob on a dry day. In that split second, you witnessed a small break in the world's perfect balance. Millions of those tiny, self-hating entities decided they could no longer remain trapped and leapt through the air to find a new place. What you felt as a slight jolt was, in fact, a reminder that you walk on a volcano of balanced energy. Nature maintains such a precise balance that we almost never perceive the brutal force that surrounds us. It's as if we were on a tightrope, with titanic forces pulling from each side, but the sum of it all results in absolute silence. This silence is what you call normality. But what if this balance were to fail for just an instant? What if the proportion of hatred among the particles increased by just 1%? The electrical force isn't just a little stronger than the gravity that keeps your feet on the ground. It's billions of times more powerful, a number with tens of zeros that human intelligence can't even begin to visualize. If you and the person next to you had even the tiniest fraction of an imbalance in these charges, the repulsion between you would be strong enough to hurl the entire Earth out of its orbit. We live protected by this perfect symmetry, believing that the world is calm and obedient. But the reality is that every atom of your skin is a battlefield where colossal forces are being canceled out at every instant. You feel the sun's heat, but you don't feel the electrical pressure that sustains your cells. You see the light from a lamp, but you don't realize that it's the result of a disturbance that begins far beyond what any microscope can show. Electricity isn't something that comes out of a socket in the wall. It's the very glue that's keeping you from disintegrating right now. Without this invisible hate and love between particles, there would be no chemistry, no biology, and certainly no you. Everything you think you know about how matter behaves is about to be displaced by a deeper, more unsettling understanding. Feynman saw error where most saw clarity, for he understood that the greatest barrier to knowledge is the illusion that we already understand the obvious. The obvious is merely what we have stopped questioning. And now, as you look at your hands and realize they never truly touch the table, you begin to feel the first discomfort of truth. The solid world is beginning to melt before your new perception. If matter is made of voids and repulsive forces, what happens when we try to force these pieces to move together? How can something we hate so much be the basis of all the technology that keeps us alive? The mystery lies not in what electricity can do, but in how it travels through us without us being able to feel its true weight. Prepare your mind to abandon the idea that you know what a copper wire or a piece of rubber is. The definitions you learned in school only serve to facilitate use. They don't explain the essence. There's a fundamental difference between being a conductor of freedom and being a prisoner of matter, and that difference is what defines whether the world will shine or remain in eternal darkness. All this silent tension is waiting for a command, a small push to bring order to the chaos. But before we understand how to tame this force, we need to accept that our intuition has failed miserably to tell us what really happens when we turn on a light. The error is active, and doubt begins to become the only safe path to the clarity that has not yet been revealed. Imagine a party where the space is cruelly divided. There are groups that never leave their seats. They are bound by invisible ties to their own atoms. This prison is what defines a piece of rubber or wood. On the other hand, there are materials that function like open avenues. In these places, there are travelers who have no owner. They can jump from one group to another without asking permission. We call these wanderers free electrons inside the metal. Feynman saw the error where intuition tells us that metal is solid. For an electron, copper is an open field of possibilities. Electricity only exists because these travelers can run. Without this freedom, the world would remain in eternal silence. But this freedom comes at a price that matter exacts along the way. Even the widest avenues have stones and obstacles. Every time a wanderer stumbles upon an atom, something happens. The atom receives a blow and begins to vibrate furiously. This microscopic agitation is what your senses call heat. When you touch a hot wire, you feel this internal struggle. The atoms are being shaken by travelers trying to pass through. The glow of a lamp is nothing more than the cry of this struggle. Feynman realized that intuition is misleading in separating light from heat. Both are born from the same resistance and the same physical effort. Light is proof that matter is being bombarded. Energy does not disappear. It only changes form and tone. Think about the discomfort of trying to get through a panicked crowd. You have to push, dodge, and fight for every inch. This effort generates fatigue that translates into heat. Electricity is a force that needs to overcome the inertia of the world. Notice how the rubber protects you from this invisible war. It's made of prisoners who refuse to participate in the dance. They form a wall that keeps travelers on track. Without the prisoners, the freedom of electrons would be total chaos. We are dealing with a balance of power between flow and restraint. Everything you use depends on this harmony between the free and the bound. Your intuition believes that the wire is merely a passive conductor, but it is a battlefield where energy is traded. The authority of matter lies in its capacity to resist. The world doesn't want energy to pass without leaving a trace. That trace is what warms your home and illuminates your nights. You're merely taking advantage of the leftovers of an atomic collision. Notice how nature organizes freedom in narrow corridors. Nothing is left to chance, and nothing flows without an emotional cost. Electricity is the result of this conflict between following and stopping. Metal allows movement, while rubber guarantees the destination. Your mind is now beginning to visualize the inner structure of the world. Surfaces are not merely external coverings or protections. They are deliberate choices between free chaos and contained order. The secret of electricity lies precisely in this physical separation. Prepare your perception to understand that movement is only half the story. Something much faster exists than the movement of the loads themselves. The next step requires you to forget the idea of ordinary speed. Reality operates at a frequency your eyes have never seen. Now imagine the simple act of pumping air into a tire. As you push the piston, you feel the resistance growing under your hand. The air is being crushed and the molecules protest with heat. This tremor travels through the metal and directly reaches your skin. But notice something your intuition often completely ignores. When you push the top of the pump, the bottom reacts instantly. There is no perceptible delay between your action and the result. The pressure spreads like a wave in a lake struck by a stone. Feynman saw the error where the mind imagines particles racing. Air molecules don't need to travel from top to bottom. They simply push their neighbor, which pushes the next in line. The momentum is almost instantaneous, even though the particles are slow. Electricity works under exactly the same logic of pressure. The wire is already full of electrons waiting for a reason. They're not coming from the power plant on a long-distance race. They already live inside the switch and the light bulb in your room. When you close the contact, you only give the first push. This command travels at the speed of light through all the material. The electron that enters your house pushes what was already there. The light turns on because the entire army reacted to your command. Feynman realized that intuition is deceiving about speed. The messenger walks slowly, but the message flies through space. We are surrounded by trillions of particles awaiting orders. All technology is merely the art of giving the right push. Tell us in the comments if you've ever imagined electricity running through you. It's strange to think that it was already inside you all along. The silence of the wire is simply the absence of a reason to act. Your perception of movement will never be the same again. Notice how this pressure needs an uninterrupted path. If there's a pothole in the road, the entire army decides to stop. Electricity hates a vacuum and demands absolute continuity. A circuit is simply a pact that the path will be respected. Nature demands that the cycle be closed for the work to occur. If you open a crack, energy accumulates and generates tension. This tension is the desire of matter to resume its flow. The danger lies precisely in this repressed desire for movement. Feynman saw the error where common sense believes in separation. There is no here and there when we talk about electrical impulses. The entire system is a single entity that breathes together. You are merely the hand that decides when the music should begin. Now consider the fragility of this system you use every day. Everything depends on the integrity of microscopic bridges and thin wires. If a single link is lost, the entire giant goes back to sleep. Your life is sustained by a network of connections that never fail. The authority of the flow resides in its ability to be omnipresent. You don't create the movement, you only allow it to happen. Electricity is a patient force that awaits your permission. Your hand on the switch is the greatest power you wield in the world. Doubt is now beginning to occupy the space of your former certainty. If the message travels without the messenger, what is the signal really? The electric world is a conversation of hidden pressures and desires. Prepare your heart for the force that governs space itself. Now imagine you're standing before a large river that flows calmly and steadily. Intuitively, the water moves only because of the slope of the terrain, going from the highest point to the lowest. If the river were perfectly level, the water would remain still, transforming into an immobile and silent mirror. The difference in height is what creates the motivation for movement, transforming potential energy into a dynamic flow. In electricity, this difference in height is what we call voltage. It's not about having many electrons, but about having a pressure imbalance that forces them to move. A battery is like a water reservoir placed on top of a hill, ready to pour out its contents as soon as the valve is opened. Without this electrical difference in height, the free electrons would continue wandering aimlessly, like dust in a sunbeam. Feynman saw the error where common sense manufactures fragile certainties, noting that people treat voltage as if it were electricity itself. Voltage is merely the desire for movement, the tension that precedes action. You can have thousands of volts in an object, and not a single electron moving, as long as the path is blocked. The force is there, repressed and silent, waiting for a single opening to manifest itself. Notice how this pressure can be felt even without direct contact. When you bring your hand close to an old television or a generator, you feel the hairs on your arms stand on end. There is no wind, there is no touch. There's only the space being strained by an invisible electrical pressure. The universe is warning that the balance has been broken and that nature is eager to correct this error. As Feynman warned, intuition tells us that empty space is simply nothing, but electrical space is a battlefield full of tensions and potentials that can be felt even before they happen. Electrical pressure shapes the reality around you in ways your ordinary senses are unable to detect. You live in a network of influences that defines the structure of every molecule of your being. Now try to imagine the force that holds an atom together. At the center, we have the nucleus with its positive charges, and around it, the electrons with their negative charges. Logically, due to attraction, they should collapse on top of each other and disappear. But there is a delicate dance, a balance of energies that keeps the electrons in a constant orbit, creating the volume we call solid matter. All the chemistry you know is, in fact, a story about electrons seeking new partners to balance their pressures. When oxygen meets hydrogen to form water, they are merely exchanging electrical favors to achieve a calmer state. Life is an endless sequence of electrons changing hands, releasing and absorbing energy in every tiny transaction. Feynman realized that intuition is misleading when it separates biology from physics. Your thoughts, movements, and emotions are electrical signals that travel through your nerves with frightening precision. You are a complex electrochemical processor, operating under the same laws that light a lamp or move a motor. The boundary between what is living and what is inanimate matter disappears before the sovereignty of electrical charge. Notice how this electrical force is absurdly stronger than any other you experience in everyday life. Gravity seems strong because it keeps planets in orbit, but it is the weakest and most timid force in nature. If you take a small refrigerator magnet, it can overcome the gravitational force of the entire Earth to hold a piece of paper. The whole planet pulls downwards, but the electrical force of the small magnet wins the battle effortlessly. As Feynman warned, gravity is merely what remains when gigantic electrical forces cancel each other out almost perfectly. We live in a world where the positive and negative are so well distributed that we don't feel their devastating power. We are like ants walking on the surface of an atomic bomb that never explodes because all the pieces hold together with the same force. Consider the magnitude of this balance. If there were just a 1% difference between the number of protons and electrons in your body, you would explode with a force that no steel wall could contain. The reason you can shake hands with someone without causing a cosmic disaster is the mathematical precision with which nature distributes its charges. Feynman saw the error where no one suspected it, noting that our existence depends on a perfect accounting of invisible particles. Every time you breathe, trillions of electrical interactions occur to maintain the integrity of your tissues. The solidity of your body is an illusion maintained by an electrical guard that never sleeps and never fails. The world is a miracle of compensations and cancellations of brutal forces. Now imagine what happens when we decide to use this force intentionally. By spinning a magnet near a wire in a power plant, we are stealing some of this balancing energy to send it through miles of cables. We are creating an artificial imbalance so that it can do work in our homes. Modern civilization is the result of having learned to whisper orders to the electrical giants. But even with all our knowledge, we still stumble over the simplest question of all. What is an electric charge, after all? Why does one particle decide to attract another and repel a third? We can describe the pattern, we can predict the outcome, but the why remains an abyss that science has yet to cross. We are operating the machine without knowing the secret of its construction. The feeling of understanding is often just the habit of no longer asking questions. We call the art of manipulating these impulses electronics, but we act as if we were the masters of the universe. In truth, we are merely attentive observers who have learned to hitch a ride on a flow that has always existed. Electricity wasn't invented. It was merely noticed by minds that dared to doubt the obvious. Prepare yourself to face the reality that nuclear energy, so feared and discussed, is, at its core, just another manifestation of this electrical fury. When an atom splits, the explosion we see is the electrical repulsion between the pieces that have finally been freed from the prison of the nucleus. What we call nuclear energy is electricity that was compressed into a tiny space and decided to escape. The mystery is becoming increasingly dense as we progress. You began this journey thinking you understood touch, and now you realize that even the most powerful bombs in the world are driven by the same hatred between particles that prevents your fingers from piercing the table. The continuity of reality is breaking down, and what remains is a doubt that no textbook can erase. Imagine you are now observing a bird perched peacefully on a high-voltage power line. It seems completely unaware that beneath its feet flows enough energy to power an entire neighborhood. The bird doesn't get shocked, doesn't get burned, and shows no discomfort. To your intuition, the wire should be a place of immediate death, an invisible river of fire that consumes everything it touches. The bird's secret lies in the fact that it doesn't offer a path for electricity to go anywhere. Because both its feet are on the same wire, the electrical pressure is identical at each point of contact. There's no difference in level, there's no reason for electrons to decide to pass through its fragile body. Electricity prefers to continue along the copper, which is a much easier and more generous avenue. Feynman realized that intuition deceives us by making us fear the object itself, when we should fear the potential difference. The danger lies not in the wire, but in what happens if you touch the wire and the ground at the same time. By doing so, you become a bridge between maximum pressure and the silence of the ground. Electricity does not hesitate. It flows through you with the force of a waterfall reaching the ocean. Notice how your own body is an excellent conductor, composed mostly of salt water that loves to facilitate the movement of charges. We are made of a material that electricity recognizes as a friendly path. That's why the danger increases dramatically when we are wet or barefoot on damp ground. We are removing the barriers that protect us from this incessant flow. As Feynman warned, nature does not forgive those who ignore the rules of balance. Grounding is our way of providing a safe path for electricity to escape in case of error, sending it directly into the vastness of the planet. Earth is the great repository of charges, an infinite stomach that swallows any imbalance without ever being satiated. We live on top of a giant moderator that keeps us alive. Write in the comments, have you ever felt that instinctive fear of electricity even without fully understanding how it works? It's curious how our bodies perceive danger even before our logic can explain the concept of a circuit. This fear is a remnant from a time when the only human contact with electricity was through lightning and inexplicable static electricity. Try to visualize what happens in an atomic explosion from this new perspective. Inside the uranium nucleus, 92 positive protons are crushed into an unbelievably small space. They hate each other with a godlike intensity. wanting to fly away from one another every billionth of a second. They only remain together because there is an even stronger force, a nuclear glue that holds them together against their will. The moment a neutron strikes that nucleus and breaks that glue, the accumulated electrical repulsion explodes in freedom. The pieces of the atom are hurled away by the same force that pushes the electrons from your shoe off the ground. The tremendous energy of a nuclear bomb is, in its essence, pure electrical energy that has been released from a microscopic prison. The destruction we see is the result of an electrical hatred that has finally gained space to act. Feynman saw the error where the mind creates false continuities, noting that we call nuclear what is in fact the triumph of electricity. We are so used to giving different names to the same phenomena that we forget that the rule of love and hate between charges governs from the atom to the star. The electrical force is the true architect of destruction and construction in the universe. Notice how the light you see right now is a product of this same process. The sun doesn't shine simply because it's hot. It shines because electrical collisions and reactions within it release waves that travel through the vacuum. Light is proof that electricity doesn't need matter to exist. It can become an independent entity that traverses the void. The space between the stars is filled with this constant electrical dialogue. As Feynman warned, intuition leads us to believe we are isolated from the world. But you are connected to every light bulb, every ray of light, and every distant atom through this invisible network of electric and magnetic fields. You are part of a continuous fabric of energy that knows no boundaries. What happens at one end of the universe reverberates throughout the rest through this sovereign electrical influence. Feynman realized that the authority of knowledge lies in the simplicity of admitting what we don't know. We can build engines that power cities and systems that transmit information in real time, but we are still unable to touch the essence of the charge. We use electricity like a skilled slave, but we never converse with it as equals. We are technicians in a world of profound mysteries. Imagine what would happen if you could turn off the power for just a millionth of a second. Everything you consider solid would instantly become a cloud of fine dust. Your bones would disintegrate, the walls of your house would disappear, and the atmosphere itself would be lost to space. Electricity is what holds the world together, preventing chaos from regaining its hold on matter. Notice how absolute and silent this dependence is. We are so immersed in this electric sea that we forget its existence, just as a fish forgets about water. We only notice the force when it is gone, or when it strikes us with the violence of a shock. Normality is a state of blindness to the Herculean effort that nature makes to keep us whole. The narrator's authority here doesn't seek to teach you formulas, but to make you feel the discomfort of being alive in a world you don't control. You walk on forces that could move mountains and believe your power resides in your will. But your will is merely the result of electrical impulses that decide how you should act. Who is the master, and who is the instrument in this dance of charges? The final revelation is near, but it will not bring the comfort you expect. Understanding physics is not meant to solve the world, but to show us how strange it really is. We are reaching the point where knowledge becomes indistinguishable from silent wonder. Electricity has brought us this far, but it refuses to tell us its true name. Prepare yourself for the conclusion of this journey, where the questions that remain will weigh more heavily than the answers you found. The intuition you brought at the beginning lies in pieces on the floor, and what remains is a sharp and restless perception. The mystery of electricity is not something to be solved, it is something to be inhabited. You will never look at an electrical outlet or a sunset the same way again. We have now reached the point where all the comfortable images you have constructed need to be abandoned. You have traveled a path that began with the illusion of touch and ended in the fury of an atomic explosion. You have seen that metals are corridors of freedom and that insulators are prisons of atoms, but none of this answers the fundamental question a child would ask when faced with a lit lamp. Why do charges attract each other? Why does the universe obey these rules and not any others? The truth is that physics doesn't explain the world. It only finds the patterns that nature repeats with absolute fidelity. We call a set of observations electricity, but the name is not the explanation. As Feynman used to say, you can know the name of a bird in every language in the world and still know nothing about the bird. Understand that science is the art of organizing our ignorance in a useful way. We learn the arithmetic of nature so that we can build machines that work, but the essence of what we are manipulating continues to slip through our fingers. We are dealing with a power that sustains reality, but which hides behind equations and technical labels. Mystery is the beating heart of everything we call knowledge. Feynman saw the error where most saw the conclusion, understanding that the greatest discovery is not a definitive answer, but the perception of a new doubt. Electricity is not just that thing that comes out of the wall. It is the phenomenon that allows you to be who you are now. Every thought that passes through your mind is a tiny electrical spark, a communication between cells that defines your consciousness and your soul. You walk through a world where almost everything you see and touch is, at its core, an electrical effect. The color of a flower, the taste of a fruit, and the warmth of a hug are translations your brain makes of interactions between charged particles. Life is an electrical symphony played on a stage of immense voids. We are floating in a sea of forces that cancel each other out with a perfection bordering on the impossible. As Feynman warned, nature's imagination is far greater than ours. Every time we think we finally understand the secret, it shows us a new unfolding, a new layer of complexity that forces us to start over. The universe is not obligated to make sense to our limited logic. And yet, in some admirable way, we manage to predict its steps and build a world upon its laws. This is the true wonder of existence. It's not the fact that we have all the answers, but the fact that we can ask the questions and get consistent answers. We may not know what charge is, but we know that if we spin a magnet, light will appear. There's a deep trust between man and nature, a silent pact that the rules will not change tomorrow without warning. The invitation extended to you is not to memorize technical terms, but to look at the world with a new kind of intellectual respect. The next time you turn on a light, try to feel the tremor of the atoms being shaken. When you touch a surface, remember the invisible abyss that prevents you from truly reaching it. Feel the presence of the electric giants that cancel each other out in your body so that you can walk in peace. Knowledge doesn't take away the mystery of things, but rather, it makes them even deeper and more beautiful. The more we understand about how electricity works, the more we realize how extraordinary the simple fact of our existence is. Physics is a path of humility where we learn that we are part of something much larger than our common perception allows us to see. The world is a much stranger and more vibrant place than you ever imagined. Feynman understood that doubt is the only fertile ground for true intelligence. If you leave this video with more questions than answers, then the objective has been successfully achieved. Uncomfortable doubt is a sign that your intuition has shifted and that your mind is ready to grow. Don't seek the comfort of closed explanations. Seek the restlessness of new discoveries. The ending of this story doesn't resolve the issue because the issue is infinite by nature. Electricity will continue to flow, atoms will continue to vibrate, and balance will continue to protect your life without you needing to ask. What has changed is not the world, but the way you inhabit it. You are now a conscious spectator of the great war of love and hate that keeps the stars in the sky. If you felt that something fundamental in your perception was displaced today, consider sharing this unease with other curious minds. Subscribe to Continue Questioning the Obvious and leave your mark in the comments, even if it's just to say that the world seems a little less solid now. Your participation is what keeps this dialogue alive and transforms curiosity into real knowledge. Feynman's journey was a constant quest for clarity through the acceptance of ignorance. We can follow that same path, one step at a time, doubting easy certainties and embracing the complexity of reality. The universe is waiting for your next question, and the answer will likely be more electrifying than anything you can imagine right now. Keep your eyes open for the subtle crackles of reality. Electricity is everywhere, whispering secrets about the construction of matter and the nature of light. You will never again be alone in the dark, for now you know that even silence is laden with potential and promise. The world is a constantly renewing electrical work of art, and you have just gained a new pair of eyes to observe it. The ending is not a closure, but a starting point for your own investigation. What else is your intuition hiding from you? What other comfortable lies have you accepted as absolute truths? The search doesn't end here. It merely changes direction. Go and observe the tremor of the world with the calm of one who has already accepted that reality is much deeper than the senses can grasp.